a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Money doesn't grow on trees, but coffee does, which means coffee is a fruit. So the next time you want some fruit juice, check out a cup of the nectar of the gods. Drinking bad coffee is wrong. So, to get the best coffee in the universe, swing by Organic Man Coffee Trike, 4501 McPherson. Find out if I know anything about coffee. You can also avoid the drive by going to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. Good coffee leads to good decisions. The best coffee leads to the best decisions. Saturday, August 17th from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m., there will be the UFO Con in Jefferson, Texas. Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, will be the key speaker. Daniel Allen Jones will be the MC, and he will also be one of the speakers. If you've never heard Daniel speak, well, you're missing a lot. There will be a few other speakers, and somehow or other they're going to squeeze me in there as well. So if you want to see me live and in person and possibly on stage, that is, if there is a stage, well, Jefferson, Texas, August 17th. That's a Saturday. It's up there by Marshall, Texas, which is up there by Texarkana. It's only 560 miles for me to drive from here to there. If you're in Laredo and you discover you've got bike problems, Border Town Bikes. Joe used to work for Doyle back when Pro Bikes was with us, but due to circumstances, he now has his own shop. It's on Sandario. It's just north of where Pro Bikes used to be. There are a lot of strange stories out there that don't have enough information to make an hour-long show. I saw Vic Hermanson had an eye-catching item for his show, Paranormal Rundown. I did some digging and I only found a little bit on the mystery, but still it perked my attention, so here we go. Back in 1950, in Paradise, Louisiana, an 18-year-old woman named Jacqueline Cato was haunted by a man who whistled outside her window at night. The whole story started before she was engaged to State Trooper Herbert Belsom. Cato would hear wolf whistles outside the window of her home that she shared with her mother. On at least one occasion, their home was broken into. She continued to hear the whistling night after night, up until she announced that she was engaged to Belsom. The whistles changed to a menacing funeral dirge. Oftentimes, as the whistler started to fade away, they would hear a blood-curdling moan. Other people heard the whistler on several occasions, but they never got to see him. The local sheriff thought the whole thing was just a hoax, and he said so in the papers. He soon changed his tune and said that the whistler had been caught. No charges were ever recorded, and there's no name or any kind of a police report. As far as anybody knows, the suspect that was caught was never booked or photographed. It sounds as if the sheriff was trying to brush the story under a rug. Cato began receiving phone calls. The voice on the other end was a man who promised he was going to stick a knife in her if she went through with the marriage to Belsom. One evening she collapsed when she, her mother, her aunt, and a New Orleans reporter heard the Whistler at work. The yard was searched, but nobody was ever found. Investigations by the state police and then the sheriff's office turned up nothing. Caddo went to stay at Belsom's parents' home and try to get some rest. Caddo's mother received a phone call from the Whistler saying, "Tell Jackie I know she's at the Herberts' house." On October 1st, she married Belsom without incident, and she was never bothered by the Whistler again. Nobody knows if the Whistler was there in the crowd as Caddo and Belsom were married. I'm sure a few people were keeping an eye on everyone who might look a bit suspicious. Belsom would have had a few fellow state troopers in attendance, and cops are almost always on alert. On several occasions, a few people, besides Jacqueline, did hear the whistling and the moaning. But the strange thing was that nobody ever saw the person doing it. There was never any evidence of him having been there. Rudolf Diesel is best known as the inventor of the diesel engine, the ones the Diesel brothers are always getting all cranked up about. If you don't know who the Diesel brothers are, you need to check. After working as an engineer developing everything from refrigerators to steam engines, Diesel ultimately filed a patent for his engine in 1892. Instead of using spark plugs to ignite the fuel, a diesel engine uses compression. The fuel is squeezed into the cylinder until it explodes, pushing the piston back up. You get better mileage with the diesel and they deliver more power. The initial cost is a bit higher and maintenance is also a bit more expensive. Gas engines make less noise and they are cheaper, so they became more popular as cars and trucks were becoming the thing to have. September 29th, 1913, Diesel boarded a ship bound from Antwerp to London. Witnesses at the time said he had dinner on board and then he retired to his cabin at about 10 p.m. He had requested a wake-up call for 6:15 in the morning. Diesel's bed was never slept in, and his night clothing was found laid out undisturbed as well as the blankets. Official accounts concluded that Diesel had perished in the night. Some say he fell overboard during a midnight stroll on the deck, but there was no report of rough seas or inclement weather. There was no reason he could have fallen overboard. The more common version says that this 55-year-old man jumped over the rail because he was in bad health. As far as I could tell, he was in about as good a health as most folks at the time. There were no reports of him ever having any real physical issues. Some say that Diesel was running from his huge debts that he accumulated over the years that he was developing his engine. Diesel's engine was instrumental in development of the German U-boats, which would play a major role in both the First and Second World Wars. In 1913, the Great War was getting steamed up. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, he's not in Australia. I often wonder, why does Austria and Australia sound so much alike? Anyway, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria was still very much alive, but the folks behind the scenes, the ones who saw a lot of profit in any conflict, were beginning to stir things up. May 30th, 1913, a peace treaty was signed ending the First Balkan War. The newly aligned Slavic nations of Serbia, Montenegro, Bulgaria, and Greece had driven Turkish forces out of Macedonia. A month after the peace treaty was signed, Bulgaria turned against its former allies, Serbia and Greece, in a surprise attack ordered by King Ferdinand I, without consulting any of his government officials. The attack led to the Second Balkan War, in which Bulgaria was quickly defeated by forces from Serbia, Greece, Turkey, and Romania. Austria-Hungary Austria-Hungary, yeah, Austria-Hungary, which had badly wanted to see Serbia smashed to pieces, was shocked and disappointed by the results of the two Balkan Wars. What good is it having the best weapons available if everybody else has them as well? Diesel was en route to meet with members of the British military to see about selling them his much better engine to be used in their warships. Some believe German agents snuck aboard Diesel's boat and killed him in order to prevent him from sharing his inventions with the Brits. News reports said the Diesel family was left with millions of dollars in cash, so this running from his debt was not a thing. His body was never found, and eventually Britain managed to manufacture their own diesel engines. A Diesel's body was not recovered. However, there were news reports coming out saying that his body was found floating in the water near Norway, or maybe off the coast of Belgium. Lots of bodies were found, and every time they found one, they said, "Oh, we found Diesel's body," but they were never able to identify any of them. A newspaper came out saying that Diesel was actually living in Canada and that the reports of his death were just smoke and mirrors. Next time you see a diesel powered vehicle, just think, where did Rudolf Diesel go and what really became of him? I know a lot of women who are far better capable of taking care of themselves than a lot of the guys I know. The vast majority don't fit into this group. Too many people go through life telling themselves that nothing bad is ever going to happen to them. I call these folks victims. The bad folks call them targets. During the late 18 and early 1990s, try that again. During the late 1980s and 1990s, several women went missing in Ireland. As police looked into these disappearances, a pattern began to form. Many of the missing had been last seen in an area shaped like a triangle. Anytime you pick out 3 points on a map, well, it's going to form a triangle. Once the name had been mentioned by the press, it became the name of the case. The, the missing women became a part of Ireland's Vanishing Triangle. The first case tied to the triangle was May 3rd, 1988. Priscilla Clark, 25, and her employee, 39-year-old Lydia Kavanagh. The pair were out riding in the country when they didn't return home. A search party went out looking for them. They found the horses, and then they found the body of Lydia in a river. Priscilla's body was never found. March 26, 1993, 26-year-old Annie Bridget McCarrick disappeared. The last confirmed sighting of her was that morning near her home in Dublin, where she was recorded on CCTV. Several people reported seeing her in Enniskerry. She was supposed to have some friends over to her home, but was not there when they arrived. The friends reported her missing to authorities, and a search was begun. On March 24th, 2023, authorities announced that they had upgraded her missing persons case to a murder inquiry. 39-year-old Eva Brennan of Rothgar went missing July 25th, 1993. She was last seen when she left a family lunch at her parents' house after a small argument. Probably wanted to know why she wasn't married and having kids yet, but that's just a guess on my part. Brennan's father went to her apartment a couple of days later when she hadn't been heard from. He rang the doorbell and then he went over to the Horse and Hound pub, which was owned by their family. He asked the barman to come with him, and they broke a window to get into his daughter's apartment. The jacket that Eva had worn on the day she was last seen was there. So it stood to reason that she had returned home after her small argument. It took 3 months for the authorities to get involved. A search was begun, but after so much time, there was little chance of success. When Eva Brennan was last seen, she was wearing a pink tracksuit and leggings, a man's wristwatch with a brown strap, and she was carrying a red leather-up handbag. Imelda Keenan, 22, was living in Waterford City when she disappeared January 3rd, 1994. She had initially gone to stay with one of her brothers in Cobb County. Then she went to stay with two other brothers in Waterford City. Keenan attended the Central Technical Institute in Waterford, where she was taking computer classes. Keenan left home to go to the post office. She was last seen by a doctor's secretary who knew her quite well at about 1:30 p.m., walking down William Street to Lombard Street. She was never seen again. Josephine Dullard, 21, of Callan, was living in Harold's Cross, Dublin, when she went missing November 9th, 1995. She had dropped out of a beauty course after finding out that working and going to college at the same time was just too difficult. On the day she disappeared, she was planning to move home to Colin. Josephine had missed her bus to Colin and had to take a bus to Nass County instead. She rode the bus to Kilcullen and began hitchhiking from there. She was last seen using a payphone in Moon, and through the telephone records, authorities found out that the call was made at 11:37 p.m. to Dullard's friend Mary Cullinan. She ended the call and seemingly vanished into thin air. Fiona Pender, 25, of Tullamore, went missing August 23rd, 1996. She was last seen leaving her ground floor apartment by her boyfriend, John Thompson. Pender was 7 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance. It looks as if she had left everything in her apartment, stepped out the door, and was gone. In 2008, a small wooden cross bearing the name Fiona Pender was found on the Slive Bloom Way at the border between Lois and Offaly, which led to the belief that Fiona might be somewhere on the Slieve Bloom Mountains, or at least what's left of her. Ciara Bren, 17, went missing on February 13th, 1997, on Bachelor's Walk in Dundalk. Dundalk? Yeah, Dundalk. She was last seen by her mother, Bernadette, who said at the time that they had both gone to bed just after midnight. At around 2 a.m., Bernadette got up to go to the bathroom, and she discovered that Ciara was not in her bed. The window was unlatched, so her mother just simply thought that Ciara had climbed out the window. Authorities believed that she had slipped out in order to meet someone. In 2014, two credible witnesses came forward with sightings of Ciara the night that she disappeared. In 2015, a man was arrested, but he was quickly released without any charges being filed. Fiona Sanote, 19, was living in Broadway when she went missing February 8, 1998. Fiona was last seen leaving Butler's Pub in Broadway with her ex-boyfriend, the father of her 11-month-old daughter. Carroll told investigators that he had walked Sinnott back to her house in Ballyhit, Wexford, and that he had spent the night sleeping on her couch. Sinnott had gone directly to bed complaining of pain in her arm and upper back. The next morning, Carroll said Sinnott was planning to get a ride to her doctor later that day. Sinnott vanished without a trace. She never made it to the doctor. There was no record of her having gone to any of the local clinics. In September 2008, a memorial plaque for Sinnott was stolen from a cemetery in Our Lady's Island in Wexford. The marble plaque had been cemented into the wall, but was removed in the night just before it was to be unveiled. In 2005, her case was upgraded to a murder investigation. Catherine Madigan, 35, was a school teacher and the mother of one. She was admitted to the hospital for depression, then checked herself back out. Catherine disappeared after leaving St. Patrick's University Hospital in Dublin on May 14, 1998. Hospital staff informed authorities that she was going for occupational therapy. She was seen on closed-circuit television leaving the hospital and was reported missing that same day. Catherine is presumed dead, but her body has never been found. Her clothes were found in Bray Head, May 20th, 1998. Deirdre Jacob, 18, of Newbridge, went missing at 3 p.m. July 28, 1998. She was living in Twickenham, London, and studying at St. Mary's University, but she had gone home for the summer. She'd gone to the bank to get a bank draft to pay for student accommodations at the university. Then she went to the post office to mail it. A passing motorist said that he had seen Jacob walking along the street just yards from her folks' house. She vanished without a trace. In 2018, the case was reclassified as a murder inquiry because of new information and a review of the case. All these women vanished. Their bodies were never found. In the same area, in the same time frame, several women were murdered. Antoinette Smith, 27, the mother of two young daughters, disappeared at 3 a.m. on July 12, 1987. She had left home to attend a David Bowie concert at Slane Castle. I can understand that. I like the David Bowie. She returned to Dublin by bus after the concert at about 11:30 p.m. and went to the Harp Bar on O'Connell Bridge before going to another nightclub, La Mirage Discotheque in Purnell Street, with a girlfriend of hers. At the club, they met two men that they knew. The four left shortly after 2 a.m. Antoinette's friend headed home after seeing Antoinette and their two friends walking towards the taxi stand. The men got a taxi to Bailey Mum area, while Antoinette continued to walk by the Gresham Hotel, heading towards O'Connell Street Bridge. Her disappearance was reported by her estranged husband. April 3rd, 1988, her remains were found in Glendew Mountains near the Lamass Monument. Forensics showed she had been strangled. Patricia Moriarty, 29, a prison officer at Mountjoy prison, returned home in Tallaght, Dublin, just before 9 p.m. on the evening December 23rd, 1991. She left home to go to Old Bawn Center to buy Santa hats for her children. Well, it was December 23rd. On Christmas Day, Patricia's husband reported his wife was missing. The authorities found a witness who saw Patricia at 9:20 p.m. December 23rd walking past Bridge Burke's pub towards the Old Bawn shopping center. A second witness came forward saying that he saw a woman matching Patricia's description entering a red car at the entrance to Old Bawn Shopping Center. June 21st, 1992, a man was cutting turf in the Wicklow Mountains in an area known as the Glassmuck Breaks, less than a mile from where Smith's body had been found when he found human remains. These were identified as Patricia's through dental records. It was concluded that Patricia most likely was strangled, as there were no signs of any trauma. Marie Kilmartin, 35, of Belade, worked at a local nursing home. She left for work at 11 a.m. December 16th, 1993. At 4 p.m., two of Marie's co-workers dropped her off at home, and they watched her walk in the front door. When Marie's housemaid arrived home from her job at 6 p.m., she found Marie was not at home and none of the lights were on. The housemaid also found Marie's groceries had been unpacked, but they were sitting on the kitchen table. A forensics examination of Marie's home uncovered no evidence as to what may have happened to her. Authorities discovered that at 4:20 p.m. December 16th, a phone call was made to Marie's landline, which lasted for about 2 minutes. The call was traced to a payphone in Portlois near St. Fintan Hospital. A witness came forward stating that she had seen a lone male entering a phone box, that's a phone booth over here, at the time the call was made. She described the man as 30 years old, 5'6" to 5'9" feet tall, with dark hair. Well, trouble is, there's thousands of people would match that description. This particular individual was never identified. June 10th, 1994, her body was discovered in Pims Lane near Mount Mellick, 10 miles from Marie's home. She was in a bog beside a drainage ditch with a cement block placed on her body. The postmortem revealed that she also had been strangled. To this date, no one has been arrested for any of these murders, which means the killer is still out there. Eddington is a suburb of Birmingham, England. The community was established in the 9th century. George Jackson, no relation to the Jackson 5, George Jackson was on his way to work on the morning of May 27th, 1817. At around 6:30, he came across a bundle of bloody clothing, a hat, and a pair of shoes near a pit that had been filled with water. George ran to a nearby home and he alerted them to what he had found. The authorities arrived at the pool and they noticed there were footprints along the edge. They placed wooden planks over the prints, hoping to preserve them as best they could. Upon closer inspection, the footprints appeared to belong to a man and a woman walking leisurely along the side of the pit. Then the footsteps of the woman came to an abrupt end, while the man's appeared to turn and run away. The authorities discovered the body of 20-year-old Mary Ashford. Mary appeared to have bruises on her arms, and it was highly suspicious that she may have been sexually assaulted prior to the murder. In speaking with Mary's friends, they were able to piece together her movements in the hours prior to her murder. Early the previous day, May 6th, Mary had left her uncle's home where she lived and worked as a maid. She dropped off a bundle of clothes with her friend Hannah Cox, who lived nearby. The two young women had planned on attending a Whit Monday dance that evening. Whit Monday, or Pentecostal Monday, also known as Monday of the Holy Spirit, is a holiday celebrated the day after Pentecost. Mary was going to swing by her friend's house in order to get ready for the dance. Around 6 p.m., Mary arrived at Hannah's room and the two women got dressed. They made their way to Tyburn House where the dance was being held. The two women danced with just about everybody in attendance, and they drew the attention of a couple of well-known men, Benjamin Carter and Abraham Thornton. At around midnight, the four left the dance. Benjamin walked Hannah home and left upon seeing her safe, while Abraham walked with Mary towards her grandfather's house. She was going to stay the night instead of returning to her uncle's. At around 4 a.m., Mary returned to Hannah's room and changed from her party clothes into her work clothes. Hannah said that Mary appeared to be in a good mood and told Hannah that she had enjoyed spending time with Abraham. She left, heading back to her grandfather's. Multiple witnesses were able to tell investigators that they saw Mary walking down the road towards her grandfather's home. They also mentioned that Mary appeared in good spirits and that she greeted them all calmly and politely as she went. Authorities believed Abraham Thornton was responsible for Mary's murder. During questioning, he had said that he had been with Mary right up until 4 a.m. That statement seemed to make him look quite guilty, since at 4 a.m. she was with her girlfriend. He said he had spent time with Mary at the dance and then had walked with her after the party, after parting from Benjamin and Hannah. They got very well acquainted in a field before he walked her back to Hannah's place. The authorities didn't believe his story and he was formally charged with murder. Most of the community was convinced that Abraham was guilty. However, three witnesses were able to corroborate his alibi, stating they'd seen him walking down the road alone during the time that Mary had been at Hannah's. The authorities had attempted to preserve the footprints, which seemed to match Abraham's shoes, but the witnesses were enough to sway the jury. Abraham Thornton was found not guilty of the murder of Mary Ashford. Here in the U.S., we have something called double jeopardy. You can't be accused of any crime that you've already gone to trial and been found not guilty of. England at the time was different. Mary's brother, William Ashford, was not happy camper. He refused to believe this turn of events and he appealed to the courts for a second trial. The judge granted a second trial by battle. This was a never before used and outdated practice. Abraham, sick of the charade, threw his gloves down and agreed to trial by battle. William seemed to see the absurdity of the situation and he backed down. Abraham Thornton was never able to regain his reputation as the community continued to believe that he was guilty of Mary's murder. Not long after his acquittal, Abraham fled the community and made his way to the United States. The murder of Mary Ashford remained officially unsolved. 150 years later, the case of Erdington murder became just plain weird. May 27th, 1974, 20-year-old Barbara Forrest was found dead in a ditch near Chest Road in the small community of Erdington, England. Barbara was an intelligent young woman and described as being very kind and very devoted to her career. During the investigation into her murder, authorities found Barbara had spent the previous evening with her boyfriend, Simon Belcher. They had attended a Whit Monday service at their church, and then they were seen by many witnesses in various pubs drinking and dancing and having a good time together. Simon told the authorities they had left the pub at around 1 a.m., that he had walked her to the bus stop, waited for her to get on, heading to her home. Over 100 detectives were called in for the manhunt for Barbara's killer. Soon, they set their sights on a suspect named Michael Ian Thornton. Michael Thornton was no discernible relation to Abraham Thornton. He was a colleague of Barbara's at the children's home where she was a nurse. He also lived on Chester Road near where her body was found. When he was taken in for questioning, police found bloodstains on a pair of his pants. While his mother had provided an alibi for her son, police discovered that this alibi was false. Michael Ian Thornton was arrested and charged with the murder of Barbara Forrest. He was tried and found not guilty due to a lack of evidence. Barbara's sister, Erica, refused to accept the results. For years, she protested loudly about her sister's case, demanding the investigation be reopened. In 2012, she demanded a DNA test of the evidence to prove once and for all whether Michael Thornton was Barbara's murderer. The police have been very close-lipped as to whether or not reopening the case is feasible. The murder of Barbara Forrest remains unsolved. What places these two murders in the bizarre category is the following. Both women were 20 years old. Both were found murdered near their homes on the same road, in the same small community. Both had told their friends of having a strong feeling of dread leading up to the murders. Both suspects were named Thornton. Weird. Starting late 1970s, the Circleville letters were sent to hundreds of residents, local businesses, government offices, and others, threatening to reveal the recipient's darkest secrets or worse. Circleville had about 12,000 residents. Somebody knew way too much about their neighbors, what they were doing in their spare time. Authorities in Circleville, the author of the Circleville letters, claimed to know everything that happened in the small town. The anonymous letter writer knew some shocking secrets. One letter said, "I've been observing your house, and I know you have children. Stay away from Macy." Sounds a lot like the Watcher from the New Jersey incident. Somebody knew that Mary Gillespie was having an affair with Superintendent Gordon Massey. Gillespie was a local bus driver. She wasn't the only one receiving threatening letters. After Mary Gillespie received a letter exposing her affair, her husband Ron began getting mail of his own. "Mr. Gillespie, your wife is seeing Gordon Massey. You should catch them together and kill them both. He doesn't deserve to live." When nobody was killed, as the writer had suggested, a new letter arrived. "Gillespie, you've had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters and billboards until the truth comes out." August 1977, Gillespie received a phone call at his home. He ran out the door armed with his revolver. He told his daughter he was going to take care of the Circleville Writer. A few hours later, Gillespie's truck was found crashed into a tree. He was announced dead at the scene. The local coroner ruled Gillespie's death as an accident. Paul Freshner, Ron's brother-in-law, considered it to be a murder. After Ron Gillespie's death, the Circleville letters continued to arrive. They continued to target Mary Gillespie, now a widow, and Gordon Massey. Everyone knows what you have done. If you don't believe us, just make them mad and find out for yourself. 1989, Mary Gillespie stopped her bus on the way to school. Somebody had put up a handmade sign on a nearby fence targeting her teenage daughter. Mary pulled the sign down and found that it had been tied to a box. She took the box home, opened it, and found there was a loaded handgun inside. It had been designed to fire at anybody pulling the sign down, but it hadn't gone off. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations found a serial number on the weapon. The gun belonged to Paul Freshner, the man married to Ron Gillespie's sister. Paul Fresher's wife, Karen, and it turns out she was a bit of a Karen, told police that her husband had written the Circleville letters. The couple had been in the middle of a contentious divorce, and Karen had discovered letters hidden in their home. Fresher denied writing the letters. He claimed the gun had been stolen a week earlier. A polygraph test showed that Fresher was lying. Police arrested Fresher, and in 1989 a jury convicted him of attempted murder. During the trial, an expert witness testified that Fresher had written the Circleville letters. Circleville residents hoped what with Fresher behind bars, the letters would stop, but they didn't. "You have been watched," warned one of the Circleville letters. Hundreds of letters swamped Circleville after Fresher's conviction. The prison warden declared that Fresher could not possibly have sent them. The prisoner had no access to pens, paper, and they knew every letter that he mailed out. Paul Fresher even received an anonymous letter from the Circleville Writer while he was behind bars. When the Circleville letters continued, suspicion went from Paul to his ex-wife, Karen. She had reported her husband to the police. Maybe Karen and her boyfriend, who matched a witness description from the booby trap crime scene, set Paul Fresher up. A decade passed, and the Circleville letter mystery only grew. December 1993, Unsolved Mysteries came to Circleville to do an investigation. The show also received an anonymous letter. "Forget Circleville, Ohio. If you come to Ohio, you sickos will pay." It was signed the Circleville Writer. Speaking with Unsolved Mysteries, Paul Fresher begged the show to look deeper. He said, "I would really like to see somebody really look at this case on the letters. Reopen the letter part of it and get in and find out who wrote the letters." 1994, the same year Fresher was released from prison on parole, the letters mysteriously stopped arriving in Circleville mailboxes. Who wrote the Circleville letters? Paul Fresher went to his grave swearing that he did not write them. Decades after the final letter, the writer's identity has never been found. The local sheriff's office closed the case, and the mystery of the Circleville letters may never be solved. The word doppelganger is German, which means double goer. A doppel means double, and ganger means goer. A goer is somebody who regularly attends a particular place or event. In this context, a doppelganger is a person's double or ghostly alter ego who is able to go places while the person is somewhere else. A doppelganger is not simply a physical likeness of a person, but a spectral or supernatural duplicate that has its own agendas and activities. One of the most famous and mysterious cases of a doppelganger is that of Emily Sagi. The case dates back to the early 19th century and has gained a reputation of being a particularly eerie and strange story. Sagi was accompanied by her doppelganger, a ghostly double who appeared to others at various times and places. Emily Sagi was a well respected and admired teacher at Pensionnat van Nieuwhoek, known for her intelligence and good looks. It was eventually realized that she had worked at 18 different schools in the preceding 16 years. Pensionnat van Nieuwhoek was her 19th school. This raised questions about why she was unable to maintain a long-term position at any school. As time went on, the school began to uncover the strange reason for Emily's job changes. Emily was known to have a doppelganger or a ghostly double that would make itself visible to others at random moments. The first time it was seen was during a lesson that she was giving to a class of 17 girls. As she wrote on the board with her back to the students, an entity resembling Emily appeared beside her and mimicked her movements. While everybody in the class could see this doppelganger, Emily herself was unaware of its presence. She never encountered her ghostly twin, which is considered to be a good thing because if you run into your own doppelganger, people believe that bad things are going to happen to you. After the first sighting, Emily's doppelganger was seen by others at the school on a regular basis. It was observed as sitting beside the real Emily while she ate, imitating her actions while she did her daily work, and sitting in class while Emily taught. On one occasion, the doppelganger even appeared while Emily was helping a young student get dressed for an event. The student became frightened when she saw that there were two Emilys in the room with her. One sighting of Emily's doppelganger occurred when a group of 42 girls were taking a sewing class. While their teacher was absent from the room, Emily entered and sat down in her place. As the students were working, they didn't think anything unusual of this until somebody noticed that Emily was outside in the garden. They were likely They were extremely frightened by the presence of this other Emily in the room, but some of them were brave enough to go up and touch the doppelganger. When they did, they discovered that their hand would pass through its ethereal body. When confronted with accounts of her doppelganger, Emily was surprised and shocked. She had never seen her ghostly twin that had been haunting her for an extended period of time. She had no control over its actions. The doppelganger had caused her to lose her previous jobs, and it seemed that her 19th job was now in jeopardy due to the unsettling experiences of seeing two Emilys at the same time. Due to the frequent sightings of Emily's doppelganger and the fear of superstition it generated, many parents began to caution their children against attending Pensionnat van Nieuwhoek, and some even complained to the school authorities. This was the early 19th century, and people were often very superstitious and afraid of the supernatural. So the principal decided to let Emily go, despite her excellent teaching abilities. This was a familiar outcome for Emily, as she had faced similar situations at her previous jobs due to her ghost twin. When Emily's doppelganger made itself visible, the real Emily appeared very tired and lethargic, as if the doppelganger was a part of her spirit that had separated from her body. When the doppelganger disappeared, she would return to her normal state. After the incident in the garden, Emily mentioned that she had felt an urge to go inside to the classroom and supervise the students' sewing, but she hadn't actually done so. I have talked to few people who have become aware that they have a doppelganger. Talking to hundreds of people about paranormal experiences, well, I'm bound to run into all kinds of stories. At around age 15, Nora told her mother that she was going to go to the corner store and she would be back in about 20 minutes. She walked to the corner store to buy some snacks. Once she had her stash of goodies, Nora returned home. Her mother asked why Nora had stood by the door, not answering her. Nora was confused and answered that she had just gotten home from the store. Her mother insisted that Nora had been there 10 minutes ago, but stood by the door not saying anything. The image then stepped out the door just minutes before Nora arrived back home. Many say these spirit doubles are actually demons, taking on the image of a living person for nefarious purposes. Nobody knows for sure what might happen if we ever meet our doppelganger. Some say bad things. It took Nora a lot of explaining to get her mother to believe that it hadn't been her. August 20th, 1966, a young man named George DaCosta Alvis decided to take his kite into the hills. As he wandered through Ventum Hill, Nintaro, Rio de Janeiro, he found two bodies laying in the weeds. When the authorities arrived, they found a very strange scene. Both dead men were wearing raincoats over formal suits. They had on homemade lead masks. Nearby was an empty water bottle, some towels, and some money. The most bizarre clue was a note that one of the dead men had in his pocket. It read, 1630, be at agreed place. 1830, swallow capsules. After effect protect metal, wait for mask signal. Police were soon able to identify the dead men as Manuel Pereira de Cruz, 32, and Miguel Jose Viana, 34. They were both electronic repairmen who hailed from Campos de Goytacazes, 175 miles from Niatero. With their identity in hand, the police attempted to retrace their last moments on Earth. They discovered that Pierre de Cruz and Viana had told their families on the morning of August 17th that they needed to go to Sao Paulo to buy equipment and a car. Instead, the two men had boarded a bus for Niatero. After arriving at about 2 p.m., the men made several stops. They bought identical raincoats at a local store and a bottle of mineral water at a bar. They kept the receipt suggesting that they were going to return the empty bottle later for a refund. The bartender who sold them the bottle of water recalled that Viana seemed very nervous. She told police that he kept checking his watch. The two men were last seen heading into the hills at about 3:15 p.m. 3 days later, they were found dead. To date, nobody is sure what happened in the hills of Rio de Janeiro that day in August 1966. Both bodies had decomposed too much for an accurate toxicology report. Police discovered Piera de Cruz and Viana were more than simple electronics repairmen. According to Piera's wife, both men had dabbled in scientific spiritualism, and both were interested in contacting alien spirits. They'd tried multiple times with their friend Elcio Gomez. At one point, an electronic device that the men had built blew up in Piera de Cruz's backyard. The three had apparently tried the device again on a beach and claimed that they had witnessed an explosion up in the sky. Police followed more terrestrial leads. They briefly eyed Gomez as a possible suspect, but Piera de Cruz's wife had said that he had fought with her husband. Gomez was also told them contradictory stories. No evidence has ever developed to bring anyone to trial. Why these two men were there in the hills, why they were dressed the same, why they were both wearing lead masks, nobody knows. The scenic fishing town of Greenock sits just 25 miles west of Glasgow. It's long been considered one of the most lovely towns in the country. When the sun sets and the night has descended upon the town, the residents of Greenock know there is something creeping about the darkness, watching them silently. The Catman is a story told by many older residents. Some thought that this was just to keep the kids inside at night. Others thought it was just a story to tell late at night. Everybody knew somebody who knew someone that had seen the Catman, but nobody was that person. Many times the Catman was seen with a dead rat hanging from his mouth. To some, the Catman was a cryptozoological beast, the last of its kind. The beast wasn't actually a Catman, but something that looked like a cross between a cat and a human. Others said the Catman was the work of local pranksters, intent on scaring drunks stumbling home from the bars at night. Even the police who received reports about the Catman sightings were unsure of what to make of these stories. In late 2000, a poor quality video was captured on a cell phone, making the legend a bit more real. The video showed the Catman wasn't some kind of undiscovered monster, but a human. As the cameraman spoke to him, Catman lifted a dead rat to his face and bit into it. The rat was real. The Catman was real. But what was he doing and why? The video was passed around between the youths of Greenock before being uploaded to the internet, where it quickly became a talking point of many message boards. The Greenock Social Works Department took notice of the video, telling the local papers that they had sent one of their caseworkers out searching for the Catman. They could not locate the guy, and they returned to their offices empty-handed. Nobody is quite sure how long the Catman has been lurking in the alleys and the tunnels of Greenock, but some of the earliest reports date back to the mid-70s. Some say he was a Russian sailor who had been stranded in Scotland, and he was forced to live off the streets. Others say he was the victim of a beating that had broken his legs and left him in hiding. Some reports said the Catman was a crazed escapee from a local mental institution. Despite the wildly varying background, a few details always remain the same. The Catman always crawls, not on his hands and knees, but on his belly. He doesn't speak, and he's almost always seen eating a rat. One witness said, "Catman is definitely real. He gave me one hell of a fright. The first time I saw him, it was just getting dark, and I saw were his eyes. His face is totally black in the video. He would lie at Scott's Lane path in the bushes behind the fence, pointing to some meat that had been left for cats, gesturing for me to pass it through the fence. I think he was scared to go onto the path for it. I used to go by Donor Barbecue, no, kebabs, sorry, Donor Kebabs for him when coming home from dancing. He hasn't been seen in ages now, since the council put up corrugated iron, so he could not be fed. Hmm. As the legend of the Catman grew more and more into a reality, the media began to take an interest in the story. In 2010, a local documentarian set out to uncover the truth. No matter where he went, those who knew the true story of the Catman refused to speak on camera. What was supposed to be a feature-length documentary ended up as being a 5-minute segment that posed more questions than answers. Another witness said, "I live in Greenock and I can vouch the Catman's existence. He has several spots that he stays in, behind the shops at the bus station or around abandoned warehouses. The local takeaway leaves stuff out for him, and every now and again you will find new blankets by one of his areas that somebody has left for him. He was institutionalized once, but could not be handled. He doesn't like people, but the people here make sure that he's taken care of as much as he chooses to be. Cups of tea or soup will be left in certain spots, and food. I know one woman who drops him off a meal every Saturday evening on her way to bingo, and she makes sure that he has a hot hat for when it gets cold. I suppose it's true definition of care in the community." The Catman is still alive, as far as I could tell. There are images of his black face surfacing as recently as April 2015. He has his own Facebook page. It's called Catman of Greenock. The last post was November 25th, 2013. So there you have it, some really bizarre stories from around the world. Seems like a lot of them were from England or Scotland. Well, I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell people you don't even know. They should be listening to Strange Things with Chris James. Until next Saturday, you know who I am, I hope. If not, see you next Saturday.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.